Oh gosh.
Again.
All right. Okay.
Good morning again.
Good afternoon.
Professor Bruce Tether. We have some questions regarding our course and our path in innovation management and entrepreneurship. The first question is one of the biggest challenging questions is, which path would you personally think is better, like entrepreneurship, starting your own thing, or innovation management, working for another company?
No brainer. Innovation management.
Oh.
Because that's what I teach.
Uh-huh.
So I have to speak from my own pathway. No, okay, so more seriously. So I think it depends on several things. One is your own appetite for risk. So if you have a higher appetite for risk, you become an entrepreneur. But I think you also need to think about the resources you need. And if you think about the resources you need, when we think about what makes something successful, remember we talked about this as to who wins from innovation. Mm-hmm. Very often it's the ownership of what we call complementary assets, which matter, right? Mm-hmm. So it's owning a brand, being able to produce in volume, being able to support the innovation, innovation, entrepreneurial innovation through successfully inventing something and then becoming successful at that. That's very rare. Mm-hmm. So we look at a case like Dyson. Dyson, amazing success, but it's the exception, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the norm. So I would say it depends on your appetite for risk. It depends on whether if you are an entrepreneur, whether you can think about how to protect your entrepreneurial idea, whether you can keep your niche small enough. I think if you're an entrepreneur, ironically, you want to stay under the radar because then nobody notices you, right? But once you become big enough, you become noticed, and then you become someone else's lunch, right? So that's when they would start to think, well, that business is worth having, right? So as an entrepreneur, ironically, you probably want to spend quite a long time effectively under the radar, not being big enough for bigger companies to rub their stomachs and think, we could have some of that, right? So I'd say innovation management is kind of safer option perhaps, but you have hopefully the resources of the company to draw upon, and you have, including things like the brand, the capacity to manufacture, all these things are what you call complementary assets. So they are different paths. They are very overlapping. The skills you need for one and the other are similar, but I would see them like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. My second question is, when you start off on a new niche, they're going to ask you, do you have any experience in that?
Yeah.
And he said you shouldn't be too focused and worried about this. How to feel more comfortable starting off on a new sphere?
Well, I think his point was that he worked in different areas, particularly within finance, banking, payments. And I think his point was that if he were asked at an interview, how much experience of banking do you have? He could say, I have some. But I think his point that he was trying to make is that people also want you to draw on a variety of experiences. So if you worked in banking for 20 years, you know the banking world, but you also don't have the capacity to see things a little bit differently, right? From another area of payments or another type of business, right? So it's actually very often, and we talked about this as well before, I mean, a lot of innovation is about brokering ideas from one context to another one. So if you're a 20-year person in banking, you've seen everything about banking, but you're also very blinkered. There's very often opportunities in a closely related area to then migrate across. But I think the other point he was making was that the techniques of introducing or developing innovations are very similar, no matter whether it's banking, payments, or some other type of software development, I think he was talking about. So, in that sense, I would agree, right? It's a kind of generic skill set you're developing, and then you're applying them into particular context. So clearly, if someone says, have you got any experience in banking, and you don't have much, then you don't want to say, well, sorry, I don't have any, because that's a bad answer, isn't it? But you can say, well, I have a little bit of experience in banking, but I've got lots of experience which is related to banking and related to new product development, which could be applied into banking. Much better answer, isn't it?
My last question is about teaching. You're a teacher yourself, and would you prefer innovation management and entrepreneurship to teaching it?
To doing it or teaching
To
it?
doing it or teaching it?
Well, I would like to do it sometime. I'm actually particularly big fan of design and design thinking, design doing. So sometimes very tempted to want to start up a small business doing design thinking. I mean, I think a lot of us times we come to forks in the road. I think of my own career, you know, I got a first as an undergraduate, and I was surprised to get a first. And I got a first because turned out I was good at research, right? So had I not got a first, I would have probably not pursued a career as an academic. I would have probably become a consultant. So we have these what we call path dependencies in life, right? In the sense of one thing leads to another. So I became a researcher. In some ways, I'm a little bit frustrated as a researcher because I think a lot of academic research is really talking to ourselves. You know, we publish more or less in order to get advancement in our careers and get, if you like, stamps in the passport. I got published in this journal or that journal. I find it rather frustrating because I think it's a pity that we spend so much of our attention there rather than thinking about applying our knowledge, helping out businesses which are around and which could perhaps benefit from knowledge. So here we had a practitioner come in to talk to you guys about what it's really like to, to do innovation management. And and I would be really keen to do almost the other way around. As an academic, go and talk to businesses. So, how do you make those platforms work? I mean, I think in life, one thing you do realize is that doing the same thing for 20, 30 years does get a little bit boring, right? And you do want to change. So, but finding the things which really motivate you. I mean, for example, I'm quite keen to do work which is policy orientated. It would be nice to engage with individual businesses. It's also nice to engage with policymakers to try and help change the rules. Right now, I'm working on a project for the Intellectual Property Office and another body called the Policy and Evidence Center for the Creative Industries. And what I'm looking at is whether the protection of designs is effective. Okay, so hopefully at the end of the study, we will have some recommendations about how we can improve how designs are protected, which would then mean that small businesses, generally design-oriented businesses are small, would be better able to protect their designs. And we talked about value creation, value capture. Designs create value, but in order to make a business out of them, you have to capture value. So in a sort of indirect way, that's another way to contribute into the real world, as well as doing a job as an academic and a teacher.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.